Hello, Albertans. Today I'm going to do an interview with C.W. Alexander. He's come to Edmonton. We're going to have a sit down and we're going to have a discussion about the validity of independence versus autonomy, looking at the hard economic facts. Let you hear from somebody else, somebody from a different area of the industry than myself, but me and C.W. go way back. He was one of the candidates that was with us with the Alberta Independence Party. Since that time, we've both been venturing into different areas. So, as we see in the media now, we're starting to get the first reports of the mass exodus of Albertans getting out of Alberta before they feel that they're going to go under and lose everything. So, we're watching doctors, engineers, scientists, professionals, tradespeople, engineers, the list goes on in the skilled industry, people who can read the tea leaves and are getting out. We're facing a coming housing crisis that's already affecting many, many Albertans. They're sharing their stories in media. It's all coming to fruition. There is only one way to stop it, and we're going to hear from somebody who has a plan to get out. Independence versus autonomy, what you need to know. Good afternoon, Albertans. I got a treat for you here today. We got C.W. Alexander from Calgary, Alberta. Come all the way to Edmonton. He's been on non-stop tour of Northern Alberta, going from town to town, community to community. He was here in Edmonton today doing a lot of meetings. So, C.W., who are you and what is Alberta for All?
Thanks. I'm C.W. Alexander and I'm an Alberta patriot. I'm 100% committed to a new independent Republic of Alberta. Alberta for All is a movement of everyday Albertans committed to a new independent Republic of Alberta, and we're building 87 societies that are non-affiliated to any political party with the intention of forming as a clear voice for Alberta an alternative, clear government alternative to what's existing right now in order to transition to an independent Alberta.
Perfect. CW, I gotta ask, what is the difference between independence and autonomy? We're hearing a lot about that. There's other parties coming up talking about autonomy. Can you please tell everybody in your words, as a long-time Alberta separatist, the major difference between autonomy and independence?
Well, with independence, we have, maybe it's better to speak to autonomy first, because autonomy at the end of the day is something that where we have the ability to operate on our own, but we still haven't addressed the fundamental issues that are facing Alberta. Number one are the structural issues that face us, the complete underrepresentation that we have in Alberta versus the rest of Canada. So even with the ability to operate on our own, which includes the things such as provincial police, our own Alberta pension plan, our chief firearms officer, a number of other things, collection of taxes, we are still subject to the federal government and the whims of them, which doesn't allow us to operate in an independent way on our own to do the things that we want, to become anything other than the status quo. So those structural issues still exist. It keeps us as a colony. Not only that, we're still facing the entrenched, unfixable issues that are facing us in the context of the socialist communist culture that's coming out of the East that is swallowing up the entrepreneurial spirit of Alberta. With autonomy, we don't actually solve the problem, but in an independent Alberta, we'll have our own constitution, our own ability to make our own decisions. We are grown up. We aren't subject to the design of being a colony that's happened with the Laurentian elites since 1905. We now have the ability to set our own destiny and become the #1 GDP per capita nation on earth that we were destined to be.
Thank you, CW. I want to get into constitutional powers of taxation. I think the real button we got to hit here is autonomy versus independence. We're stuck with the Constitution of Canada. If we go autonomy, we're stuck in that Constitution. Specifically, Section 91, which is unchangeable. And I'm going to read that to you now. Constitutional powers of taxation, Section 91. the federal government can raise money by any mode or system of taxation. Can you please tell our viewers what that means to you and to them?
Well, what it means is, in the context of where we are today, again, we are subject to a growing population, a growing underrepresentation of Albertans. Nothing will change until we make the decision to become independent. Once we do that, that federal taxation in Section 91 will no longer exist. We'll no longer be shackled to the carbon taxes, the increased taxes that are going to come long term of the costs of these universal basic income and these different other programs that we really can't afford. We need to get out from under the shackles of that, and independence is the way to achieve that, so that ultimately, instead of worrying about increased taxation, we can actually eliminate taxation and make our Alberta prosperous and free like we were meant to be.
Thank you. We hear a lot about inalienable rights in Canada: expression, association, religion, sex, security, race, life, liberty, arbitrary detention. These are supposed to be inalienable. However, loopholes for Parliament, legislatures, and judges have proven nothing is inalienable in Canada. We're watching bills such as Bill 30, Bill 32, 10, 24, and the list goes on, just by our provincial premier. Can you please tell everybody what we could do in our own country with our own constitution, in such as a republic as you present, that would protect everybody's inalienable rights and not leave these loopholes?
We as Albertans were born to be free. We were born to actually, as an individual, have the freedoms and rights that we enjoyed. With what we have today, we are subject to the whims of the federal government. We are subject to the mere nobles of Ottawa, which are the provincial powers that are really just translating what's happening at a federal level into the provincial level, which is actually affecting our ability to be free in terms of where we are. An Alberta Constitution is there and will be something that Albertans will be able to put together that ensures that the unalienable rights will never be questioned, and that we the people will actually be able to defend those rights, because that's put in place as part of the Republic of Alberta. All of the efficiencies that we want in government, the limited government, our limited ability for government to decide in any kind of legislation, will always be subject to the Alberta Constitution that will limit any politician that arrives in the legislature from actually doing anything, because those are the inalienable rights that Albertans put in place for not only today, but for our future children and our future Albertans.
Thank you, CW. I'm just going to ask a little follow-up question in there. We talk about these inalienable rights and people think we have them. However, we continually see both provincial and federal governments throw those rights under the bus. Right now, we look at guns, and we talk about what's being proposed by the Liberals, and Conservatives say, oh, we're going to hire a chief firearms officer. But according to the Constitution, we have a problem here with our policing, such that federally they're mandated to follow the Criminal Code of Canada. Is it possible in autonomy to upset that Constitution, or is it only in independence?
Well, the simple answer is it's only under independence. We're limited to what the federal government is going to ultimately decide, but with a chief firearms officer, we've put a barrier in the way. But even without our own provincial police, we will have no ability to actually enforce, ensuring that firearms and the rights of the people will be protected. So the best way to do it with independence is to put those rights to bear arms, rights to the ability to protect your family, into an Alberta Constitution, and that's the only way we'll ultimately achieve it.
Thank you, CW. Okay, the 3 conservative physical definitions. Now, this is standard. It goes across many nations. We have here in Canada Conservative Party federally, and we have this UCP provincially. I'm going to read those, and Ralph Klein followed these to a T. And these are in general definitions you can find on a Google search. The 3 conservative physical definitions are: 1, low taxes; 2, reduced government spending, and 3, minimal government debt. Can you please tell our viewers how the provincial government's doing here on those 3 issues right here in Alberta?
Well, the provincial government on a straight taxation basis has failed to really do anything on an overall basis. First of all, we still have the Kenny carbon tax, which is the industrial emitters tax that still exists even under the Rachel Notley government. While it was a consumer-based tax at $3 billion, Jason Kenney still takes $2 billion out of industrial emitters that ultimately is passed on to you as higher electricity prices. You know, we have a downloading of fees and increased fees happening across the province. The Alberta government sucking up money from the cities that you know, in percentages basis to try to justify them reducing their deficits and otherwise, but really they're raising taxes when it all comes down to it. And that's offloading those taxes into the cities, which is creating a problem for them. In terms of the actual lowering of the business corporate tax, I look at it and say, well, you know what, who's right at the end of the day? I mean, Rachel Notley talks about that we're given this $4.5 billion is being given to the corporate buddies. I think at the end of the day, you know, both being career politicians, they're saying it to meet their own special interest narrative, but when it all boils down to it, Rachel's kind of right. And at the end of the day, the business taxes are being lowered, which is benefiting a few businesses. But at the end of the day, all that money is really just going out, unless it's being actually spent here in Alberta by those companies that are operating in Alberta. It's actually going out to shareholders at the expense of further GDP decline in the province. So there would have been a better way to do that with a research technology tax credits to build out the academia, the private sector research capability, and build technology here that could have been put into place and commercialized for the benefit of Albertans. But that decision that was made is really just moving money further out of the province. In terms of government spending, today as it sits, we still have continued government spending. We started with numbers around $21 billion associated with healthcare, $18 billion associated with transportation, education, and other social services, another $16 billion being spent on various other services to run the government. That amount of money pales, nothing's really changed. You know, we haven't seen much change on either the educational or the health side. We have increased number of employees that have been carried over from the previous Notley government. We've got lots of fat. The bureaucracy is really controlling what's going on, and we've really seen no reduction in spending whatsoever. In fact, if anything, it's gone up with additional associations and societies and buddies doing analysis and consulting. All of these things are costing us money, and we are not getting to where we need to be in Alberta. In terms of deficits, well, we had a deficit that was being accumulated to 2023 of $107 billion from the previous Notley government that Jason Kenney came into. Well, since he's come into government within 1 year, we're looking at another $35 billion deficit likely, although he hasn't put the numbers out yet. Another $10 billion in debt spending. That's $152 billion, and we're headed to, if we keep going at this rate with really no plan to change things, continually spending, you know, debt money to try to create jobs, we're going to end up $250 billion by the time we hit 2023, worse than what the Notley government could have been. So I suggested to people that really, is the UCP and the NDP any different at the end of the day? They're all career politicians. They're all actually liberal light or anything but a conservative way of running government. Very inefficient, and we are not moving ahead. If anything, we're actually shackling Albertans and getting strapped and bootstrapped like being strapped to an engine of the Titanic that we can't get off, with the debt continuing to go up and up and up at the expense of our children and future of Albertans. That's unacceptable. We need to have another alternative, and independence will get us there.
Thank you. Free trade, sorry CW, Free Trade Canada. In your experience, how are conservatives and liberals historically doing on their international free trade deals? This has become a really big issue for both parties. We see they attack the Trump, both parties, and the Republicans on their protectionism. But CW, what is the tale of the tape on trade deficits and our international trading deals?
Well, first of all, a lot of our trade is done with the United States. We continue to have a trade surplus with the United States. There's many positives around that, especially for Alberta with our energy and otherwise it's a major trading partner. But we have trade deficits with China and number of other countries. If anything, whether it's Harper or the current government, they continue to allow these different investment protection acts and other things that are detrimental to the long-term interests of Albertans. And we need to, if I think of examples, the high taxation, the high regulation that we have in Canada and in Alberta has created a lot of loss of jobs over the last 10 to 15 years. And maybe the best way to describe it is just in a bit of a real story. So I was meeting with an entrepreneur, a very successful businessman, who's for many years, since like 1976, employed many Albertans in Calgary in the furnishings business. There's probably 12,000 jobs plus all the indirect jobs associated with that, so that's a lot more number of jobs in the area. In the last 10 to 15 years, with the increased regulation, the increased taxation, the increased difficulty to work with government in getting things done quickly, it's cost that Calgary and the area and the indirect economy in the order of about 12,000 jobs that are not coming back, that are gone to either the United States, China, or the Quebec. In an independent Alberta, all of those jobs will come back virtually immediately in the low tax environment that we will have in the prosperous, in our ability to actually have an economy that's not focused on winners and losers, that we can actually bring back all of those jobs and more.
CW, and a lot of people have said we're going to bring back the jobs, but I've listened to a lot of what you've said, and I've touched on this too. I guess what people want to know is, when you get down to these trade deficits, and when you talk about the primary industries, manufacturing, construction, and loss of jobs in those, can you explain to viewers the difference of taxation coming from, say, manufacturing of the primary industry for our revenues versus service sector?
Well, today, more and more in Alberta and the rest of Canada, there's so many more service sector jobs, which translates into taxation that does deliver some value. But the problem there is that's the low end of the scale when it comes down to it. It's the low end of the value chain. In a high primary industry, resource extraction industry, higher paying jobs, more technology, high-tech based jobs, those primary industries spin off a lot of taxation. It's a very high value industry. Resource extraction delivers $304 per hour worked versus a manufacturing industry or other lower paying service related things that might spend maybe $40 to $60 per hour worked. That's a big differential. So that taxation value that we have and the value that's created from that gives us a lot more capability, a lot more wealth that ultimately in primary industry spins off a lot more other service sector and related industries, which spins off taxation again. So overall, there's a spiral effect upward that creates a lot more value when we actually focus on the strengths that we have in Alberta.
I guess the biggest thing here that I would like you to touch on, that I think the viewers want to understand, is when you tax primary industry, that entire revenue goes into the system. When you tax service sector industry, you're only taking, because they're paid generally by taxation from the primary industry, you're only getting 30% back. It's not that we don't need service sector, CW. It's the fact that we have to bolster our primary sector. How are we going to be able to do that in an independent Alberta versus this state we're in right now?
Well, the first thing is we will be unshackled from Ottawa. So all of the issues that are fleeing, having capital flee our province, will be gone. The carbon taxes, the overregulation of our resource sector, We'll have borders that we can negotiate and get the things that we need, like Tidewater Access. All of these things will be a benefit in that. We will then be able to leverage the benefits that we have from that and the lowest taxes in North America, both personally and from a business perspective, to be able to attract not only the resource sector, but high-paying diversification jobs that otherwise wouldn't show up here. And to make things even a little bit even more down to earth, ground level, I mean, we and our military spending would now be our own, for example. So a lot of the GDP spending that's happening in the existing framework of what we have, the money goes to Alberta, or from Alberta to Ottawa, and that GDP spending is happening in Quebec. It's not happening here. So we would be in a position where we would spend the money right here for our own military. That will create a high-paying job spin-off industry in itself, which, as you can see, would create a lot of value, because we're buying the planes. There's companies out there like the Saab JS-39 Air Force air jets that you can get, where the technology comes here, but the manufacturing happens right here in Alberta. So those are great opportunities. Lowest tax environment, lowest tax personal tax environment. Companies love having employees. We're making a lot of money, which doesn't necessarily need to be paid way so much more for no reason. But when you're paying less tax on the money that you are receiving, it's like winning the lottery. And so those are the opportunities, just to name a few. We will be completely unleashed from Ottawa and be able to do what we want to do as Albertans and focus on our key strengths and the industries that we know will actually create the most value for us.
Thank you. Last question, and this one gets asked all the time. CW, I know I've answered it many, many times. I guess the question that everybody asks, and what media tries to throw independents under the bus, they say what you touched on was Tidewater Access. They say we can't get Tidewater Access if we go independent, because then Canada will block us. Can you tell the viewers in your own words why that doesn't apply to an independent nation of Alberta?
Well, I guess the best way to describe it to start is that we actually are landlocked within this broken federation. So that's the first starting point. So we really have no ability to affect or change the fact that we are landlocked. And so as long as we stay in the federation that we're in right now, we will not have the ability to get access from our own perspective and what meets our needs to be able to control our resources. In an independent Alberta, we immediately unlock access through borders. Like it or not, those borders provide a clear place to negotiate a solution. So not only we have three things we can do there. Number one, we own the skies. The BC, China, the US, the rest of Canada will not be able to fly over our borders without a border agreement, a skies agreement. They need that access. It costs them a lot of money to have to fly around. Secondly, we have land border access. They will not be able to execute and continue with their things like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, any existing China agreements that these federal governments have signed and otherwise, without border access to move from BC to the rest of Canada or back the other way. We have significant leverage in that. Not only that, we have other spending, national military spending, for example. Imagine now we are in a spot where we'd like to do business with certain countries. So now we have the leverage of the spend that says, well, we'd love to do business with you, but maybe you could pick up the phone and call Justin Trudeau or Aaron O'Toole or whatever other career politician that's sitting there in the interest of the Laurentian elites, and we can tell them, they can tell them, we really are looking for you guys to free up access for Alberta to give them their Tidewater access that they're looking for. We also have, alliances with the United States that will facilitate that as well, because they like our energy industry. They're getting a great deal right now. I mean, this is such a great deal that our energy is going with a differential of $20 to $40 sometimes, at the expense of having to continue auto manufacturing and dairy cartels out the east at our expense. So we're being traded off one for the other, which when we become an independent Alberta, that will no longer exist. They'll have to stand on their own with their dairy cartels. They'll have to stand on their own on their auto manufacturing. We will get the best deal for us. All of that's part of the negotiation, and that's what we will do to make that better. All in all, no matter what, even with the existing UN security agreements for international landlocked countries. We can leverage that as well, Section 127. And at the end of the day, we know that there's already 17 landlocked countries on the planet Earth right now, including Switzerland, that's the #2 GDP per capita on Earth. We will be #1 by 2035. All we need to do is to leave, be unshackled, put those borders up, and we will get Tidewater access. We don't need Kenny to do it. We don't need Aaron O'Toole to do it, because they won't do it, because they're focused on green technology, green new deals, high cost to you as Albertan. We will be crushed until we make the decision to do it. We will remain a colony, and not until we make the decision to shift and become a free and independent Alberta.
Well said, CW. Last question, how do people get a hold of you? What's your website?
If you want to reach and become a part of a movement to build out 87 societies for an independent Republic of Alberta, go to albertaforall.com. You can find us there. Get out to an event. Go to events. You can find town halls there. We are having a rally at City Hall on September 1st to celebrate three years from our first opportunity to vote for independence. September 1st being the original point at which we were designed to be a colony by Wilfrid Laurier. So we're going to take that same date, 3 years from September 1st. We're going to celebrate that, the 3-2-1 Freedom Countdown to Independence. Hope to have you out there. It'll be exciting. And in the meantime, go to albertaforall.com. That's Alberta, #4all.com. Look forward to seeing you out at the next town hall to talk to you about the common sense plan for independence and our Made in Alberta strategy for Albertans that'll lift us from where we are right now, being shackled to Ottawa on the Titanic, to becoming the #1 wealthiest nation on earth by 2035. That's a decision that you have to make. So come on out, get educated, and know your options. Do it, if at least for your children. Even if it's not for yourself, do it for your children. Come on out so that you know the facts.
Thank you so much, CW. That was a great interview. We'll get that up.